Greetings and welcome again to another Prophetic Insights. We're here analyzing current events as they are fulfilling the prophetic word. So what's trending, Hillary? What's the breaking news?
Well, by now, many of you may be aware that in Britain, Parliament declares a climate change emergency. And this headline comes from Reuters. It says, Parliament declares climate change emergency. On another news source, BBC, the following is stated. UK Parliament declares climate change emergency. This proposal, which demonstrates the will of the Commons on the issue, but does not legally compel the government to act, was approved without a vote. Dozens of towns and cities across the UK have already declared a climate emergency. Addressing climate protesters from the top of a fire engine in Parliament Square earlier, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn said, "This can set off a wave of action from parliaments and governments around the world."
Now, what's that last statement again, Hillary?
That this can set off a wave of action from parliaments and governments around the world.
You know, friends, when we read that statement in this news article from the BBC, our minds went back to Luke 21, where Christ speaks about in verse 25 through verse 28, signs in the sun, the moon, the stars, and upon the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. Now we know as the sun, the moon, the stars are literal, so are the seas and the waves roaring, climate change. But what is sea a symbol of in prophecy, Hillary?
It's a symbol of peoples or nations.
Okay, and we know that from chapter 17 of the Revelation. So as we see now the sea and the waves roaring, not only in the physical sense, they call it climate change, but in the literal sense with people, prophetically speaking, roaring, these protests going on. And Jesus says in verse 32 of Luke 21 that this generation shall not pass. This generation shall see the second coming of Jesus Christ. Friends, we are here.
Yes, we are.
It goes on to say, yes, Hillary.
Yes, so the independent news source makes the following statement. MPs, which is military police, make history by passing Commons motion to declare environment and climate change emergency. That was the headline. MPs have passed a motion making the UK Parliament the first in the world to declare an environment and climate emergency. This symbolic move, recognizing the urgency needed to combat the climate crisis, follows a wave of protests launched by the Extinction Rebellion strikers in recent weeks.
And notice what it says, that this law, this approval in the UK Parliament is the what in the world? The first in the world to declare an environment and climate emergency. And when we saw that, my mind personally went to the fact that Sister White says that national apostasy will lead to national ruin. So as we see these approvals, these laws, as it were, stating a national emergency, this will lead to a national Sunday law. And the national Sunday law is national apostasy, which will end up in national ruin. Again, but remember, it must begin in America. National emergency, national Sunday law. National Sunday law, that's national apostasy, leading to national emergency. But again, it must begin in the U.S. So as we see the seas and the waves roaring in Europe, calling for climate change policies and laws based in Laudato Si, that means we are closer in America than many of us really believe.
Yes, we are. And of course, the article we just referenced mentioned the Extinction Rebellion. And we know who just spoke at one of the Extinction Rebellion strikes or demonstrations. That was Greta Thunberg. And of course, who just met with Greta Thunberg and endorsed her movement, shook her hand and told her to keep going, keep pushing forward. Of course, that was Pope Francis. So, and we know what his solution is to combating climate change.
Sunday law.
That's right.
Let's go on with this independent article here. Labor leader Jeremy Corbyn added, "We pledge to work as closely as possible with countries that are serious about ending the climate catastrophe and make clear to U.S. President Donald Trump that he cannot ignore what, Hillary?
That he cannot ignore international agreements
and actions on the climate crisis. We have no time to waste, he added. So while the focus here from Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn in the UK on President Donald J. Trump, remember, based on prophecy, it is the people that will call for and demand a national Sunday law to combat climate change. This can be confirmed in Revelation chapter 13 and verse number 14, as well as Great Controversy, page 592, that even in free America, rulers and legislators, in order to secure public favor, will yield to the popular demand for a law enforcing Sunday observance. And then Revelation chapter 12, verse 17 will meet its complete fulfillment. Now remember, just a few days ago, let's make a connection with what's happening in the UK with what is happening in America. Just a few weeks ago, what did President Trump declare to deal with the crisis at the border?
He declared a national emergency, a state of emergency, rather.
And many were saying that that process would circumvent Congress's authority, the approval from Congress. And many were saying if another leader should take power in America, even a Democrat, it sets the precedent for a Democratic leader now to call for a national emergency to combat climate change. And then the laws written in Laudato Si will become a reality in America. What a connection.
Yes, that's right. And of course, dealing with the strikes, we know that it says only a general, this is from The Guardian, and it says that Greta Thunberg is right. Only a general strike will force action on climate change. Do you notice the word force? Force action on climate change.
Now, friends, think about that. If all that Greta Thunberg and others have been doing to combat climate change have led us to this point, here comes the question now. What if globally there is a march, there is a demand to combat climate change? Can you see how close we are then for a Sunday law to be enforced, not only in America, but all around the world?
That's right. And in the context of these global strikes, this brings us back to what the Spirit of Prophecy has told us in volume 9, page 11. It says, we are living in the time of the end. The Spirit of God is gradually but surely being withdrawn from the earth. The calamities by land and sea, the unsettled state of society, the alarms of war are portentous. The daily papers are full of indications of a terrible conflict in the near future. Bold robberies are of frequent occurrence. Strikes are common.
Are they
Is that
common?
true? Yes, they are very common.
And the last phrase says?
The final movements will be rapid ones.
The what?
The final movements will be rapid
And listen
ones.
to what this article goes on to say from The Independent. It says, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn said, we are living in a climate crisis that will spiral dangerously out of control unless we take what? Rapid and dramatic action now. This is no longer about a distant future. We are talking about nothing less than the irreversible destruction of the environment within our lifetimes. And remember, in chapter 3 of Daniel, who were the ones that united with Nebuchadnezzar to compel individuals to bow down and to worship falsely, even to worship the image of Nebuchadnezzar?
It was the mayors and the governors, of course.
All right. And these are called captains.
Yes.
And listen to what this says.
This is from the New York Times. It says, a Green New Deal? Los Angeles now has one. Mayor Eric Garcetti of Los Angeles unveiled an ambitious, wide-ranging Green New Deal for the nation's second largest city. He framed LA's ability to achieve the sweeping goals as standing in contrast with Washington's difficulties moving forward on a broad climate plan.
And remember, who met with the global governors and mayors at the Vatican just a few months ago?
Of course, it was Pope Francis. And we know what the mayors of the cities have said. They said that if Donald Trump wasn't going to carry out the agreement, that the Paris Climate Agreement, that they would, as cities, they would put into practice those policies therein.
And that's where we are. And this Bloomberg article goes on to say, not only in the UK, in America, but what's happening now in Italy.
Yes, more Sunday agitation, but this time it's for the family. Okay, so we have one thing, climate for, or Sunday for the climate, but now we're hearing a lot of agitation, Sunday for the families. This says Italy's populists want to close stores on Sunday. Listen to the reason they give. The idea is to give workers time to spend with their kids and to go to church. And of course, who says that Sundays are for families? That's the Roman Catholic Church. Pope Francis said it, Pope Benedict, and all of
Francis.
That's right, and all of his predecessors.
And notice in this Time magazine article, it came out just today. Headline says, labor unions, friends, labor unions and workers mark May Day 2019 with rallies, protests worldwide.
Wow.
And that means, yes, Hillary.
I was just going to say, we encourage you to do your own research. Look at the different countries around the world that are having these rallies and demonstrations and protests.
And now we're seeing the sea and the waves roaring. And remember what Sister White said about the labor unions, as well as the trade unions, that they will bring upon this world a time of trouble such as never was. We are in that time. And in 1888, again, below this video, in the description section, I'm going to drop these statements there for you to also read, comprehend, and share. In 1888, remember that it was the Roman Catholics, apostate Protestants, along with the labor and trade unions that were pushing for a Sunday law in that time period. So now we have come full circle with more rapidity. A Sunday law is near. The close of human probation, the second coming of Christ is near. It's time for us, my friends, to get ready, get ready, get ready, stay ready. Get
Amen.
Others ready before it is too late.
That's right. It's even at the doors. And we have even more details about this Green New Deal and this Sunday agitation from the Guardian News. Listen to this. This is the headline. It's time for nations, plural, to unite around an international Green New Deal.
International.
That's right.
And we're told that Sunday law would not only be national first in America, but it goes worldwide, and international Sunday law.
That's
Yes.
right. So are you saying that the national apostasy will soon become an international apostasy, which means not only will there be national ruin when it happens in the U.S., but there will be international ruin. We know that to be the plagues, the 7 last plagues.
Now, this past Sunday, as we bring this to a close, this past Sunday, friends, things are happening. Rapid movements are right upon us even now. This past Sunday, we did a prophetic insight from religionnews.com showing that there was a Jesuit educated person who stated this fact, that in order for the climate laws to be enacted, that politicians must lay aside the momentum to enforce those new green deals.
Right,
and what they must do now is to indoctrinate the people, change the culture, and then the climate laws can be enforced. That was an article we laid out this past Sunday, and they're calling for this within 10 years, not 10 years, but within 10 years. And they're saying that they want to move very quickly.
That's right.
To change the culture, as well as to then bring in a Sunday law. Now, on the same news media, religionnews.com, somebody rebutted Charles Camusi.
And
His name is Mark Silk. And what did Mark Silk say?
Well, he wrote an article under the headline, Laudato Si versus Green New Deal? Hardly. This is what he said.
Hold on. He laid out the fact that we should not try to put one before the other. Don't try to change the culture and then legislate climate laws. He says we must do both simultaneously. Just as what happened when same-sex marriage became the law of the land. Again, don't miss this. One is saying, Charles Camusi, that we must indoctrinate, culture shift, then enforce climate laws. Now we have Mark Silk rebutting him, saying, no, 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 no. We must use both simultaneously. Indoctrination connected with
legislation. And we see
Let's read
both
that.
happening today, and
Correct.
it has been happening for some time, probably since 2015 when Laudato Si was first introduced.
Amen.
But it says here, Charles Camosi's closing argument may be his worst. He quotes, addressing skeptics who don't believe that ecological conversion can happen in 10 years, he insists, you underestimate the power of changing hearts to bring about life-changing legislation. In 2004, GOP operatives put anti-same-sex marriage policies on state ballots to draw out voters who were opposed to the practice. By 2014, American culture had transformed so dramatically on gay and lesbian marriage that pushing legislation barring it would have been political suicide.
So those were the statements now of Charles Camosi, the first article from the Jesuit educated. Now comes the rebuttal from Mark Silk. Listen what he says now.
He says, but what transformed American culture on same-sex marriage after 2004 was not activists withdrawing from politics. It was activists bringing lawsuits and lobbying legislatures and supporting candidates and ginning up referendums, such that by the time the Supreme Court handed down its Obergefell decision in 2015, same-sex marriage had become legal to at least some extent in 38 states.
Understand that. Then he says now, so that means he's saying both must be combined, right? The indoctrination along with the people controlling politicians and persuading politicians to enforce their demands. Last paragraph, he says, on climate change, nothing has done more to change the conversation and bring the issue to the forefront of public debate than the election of Ocasio-Cortez and other climate-minded millennials. So sure, let us preach the gospel of climate change and effect ecological conversions wherever we can. Listen to what he says now in closing. But always with these words of Laudato Si firmly in mind, quoting Pope Francis, unless citizens control political power, national, regional, and municipal, it will not be possible to control damage to the environment.
This is startling. So it's all about control. And for those that know anything about history, you know that the papacy is all about controlling the conscience of individuals and punishing those who do not go along with their dictates.
So friends, in closing, let's say this. Where are we? We are right here in Isaiah chapter 8. It's time to receive our marching orders. Read Isaiah 8, verse 9 through verse 16, and you will understand what the Bible is telling us. Don't fear what they fear. Do not form or unite with them in this so-called confederacy because they fear various things. It's time for God's people to bind up the testimony and seal his law among his disciples. Get ready, stay ready, friends. It's time for aggressive evangelism. And friends, thank you for your comments. Let's awaken those around us before it is too late. Let's make sure we're in the right location before it is too late. That's country living, my friends. Let's make sure that we are spiritually ready. We are converted. Setting our homes in order, having daily devotion, evening, morning, and at noon, claiming God's promises daily. For what purpose? That we can have strength to make it. Deuteronomy 33 and verse 25, God says, as your days, so shall thy strength be. Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 31 says, they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run, not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. My friends, it's 7:02 p.m. Eastern time. We have to go. Join us this evening, 1 hour from now at 8 p.m. for another prophetic insights. Our Thursday evening Bible study. God bless. Maranatha. Maranatha?
Amen.
Maranatha.
Amen.
Remember, please join us tonight at 8 o'clock.